This webinar is about a conscious education movement that we all know and well and truly feel. If you're an educator looking for a different way to approach your craft, if you're an educator thinking, oh, I don't want to teach anymore, I want to get out of the profession, then you need to shift your perspective, because now more than ever, conscious education is so incredibly relevant. So these are transformative insights for educators, for school leaders, for those of you who want to even break out of the system and create your own progressive learning center or education model or startup. So this is all for you based upon my own experience and what I've discovered along the way. And as you know, life is the greatest experience. And in my years of being a conscious educator, through being a Waldorf teacher, through breaking out of the systems and working at my own and developing my own learning center, I've definitely brought some fundamental truths to the picture about how you can change your approach, change your perspective, and change the profession that you inherently chose yourself. So here's a brief overview of what you can expect in this 20 to 30-minute session. So by the end of this webinar, you'll not only understand the essence of conscious education, but you'll also gain valuable strengths and strategies that you can implement in your classrooms, your school, your own progressive center, as I said, or if you are brave enough, which I really, really implore you to be, start up your own progressive education model. Many different names for it, but we'll get into that a little bit later on. So that's a brief introduction about what this session is about. And I'm really, really happy that I'm able to do this off the back of my own experience. So basically, you can learn from my strivings, my failings, the bits where I screwed up, the bits where I optimize things, and the power of reflection. So the conscious education movement is a call to revolutionize the way we approach teaching and learning. Our stories are our greatest inspirations. We talk about the big domino. Once you move one thing, a whole bunch of other things move out of the way automatically. There are 3 pillars I'd like to go over in terms of conscious education. How is it that you can transition from your traditional mindset or your traditional system into a different way of approaching education? Then we move to the next level about we get above the drama, we start looking at education in a whole different way. Therefore, we need to communicate it in a different way. We need to present it in a different way. We need to approach our online strategies in a different way. And we need to fortify, enamor, empower, inspire, energize, activate ourselves. Then we look at some offerings that I have to give you today, and also the Q&A session where you want to put some things into the chat, but also what is the future hold and what is your role in that future? And then we look at making sure that we actually co-create. There are so many people that I've talked about, many conversations saying, oh, I'm really doing this amazing thing, or it's so hard in my school system. The common thread is there is no or very, very little interdependency. And I'm putting some systems together, some online communities, so that we have this interdependence continue to happen. That's what needs to happen. These systems, traditional systems, are built on divisive ways. So we need to combat that with inclusive, diverse ways. So a little bit about me, my journey with conscious education. I've been an educator for over 10 years now, over a decade, and I've worked in multiple different places around the world. One thing that really struck me is that just recently I've come back to the place where I grew up. And now I really look at that completely different. I see opportunities, I see willingness, but I also see so many inherent boundaries and barriers within the mindset of people. So as a visionary, how do I approach that? I have 2 choices. One, I lean right into it and I go really, really wild with my ideas and my knowings based upon my experience and expertise. Or I start culling that and I start kind of sitting back and saying, oh, it's a bit too hard and so on. So as a visionary, I need to keep on manifesting those ideas. I need to keep on expressing it, which is part of why I'm putting this little series together for you also to access. So in my years, I've also developed a conscious education design approach where you look at time, where you look at other elements that we'll go into later on in this webinar. So naturally, in creating your own systems, even from a classroom level, from a school level, from a community level, but also from a global level, how is it that you are branding yourself or your movement or your school or your startup? Because that has to be done in a different way. It doesn't have to emulate TikTok style. It doesn't have to emulate YouTube. It doesn't have to emulate short form content. It has to emulate the authenticity and the essence of who you are as an individual. Even if you're an individual, you either represent a collective, an institution, or an organization, or a brand, or a business, or even you introduce yourself. And you have to make sure that that authentic voice, that authentic content, the authentic design, how you can streamline that takes place for you so that you're not running around not knowing what to do and trying to do everything, which is so typical to what a teacher education mindset is. We have to be everything for everyone at the same time, which just leads to ultimate burnout. So I want to share, this is my responsibility now. I'm taking it as a personal responsibility to share insights that naturally, as a natural consequence, they disrupt common ways of doing things. They disrupt the traditional education system, but in a non-competitive and a non-combative way. And this is really crucial because over the course of developing many, many different education systems and models and even professional development for educators at a local and a global level, it's often seen as a competitive or combative approach. And that really tells you something about how fixed people's mindsets are within education, that there has to be a better way, that there has to be a better curriculum, that there has to be a better methodology. But when you look at all of these things holistically and from a systems thinking view, everything that you can lead onto the future needs to be a consequence of that which has happened in the past. So we either transcend that, we either look at that as a learning and say, there is a component I can take from that, or actually that didn't work. This is why, which shows me the way forward, which shows us the way forward. And I'm looking for the willingness factor to innovate, to create, to ideate, to always not know that there will be a definition. Because as soon as we define what it is, then we've missed the point. Naturally, we need to have these definitions to help us understand. But these are indications and inspirations. They are provocations for us to look and create a different way of approaching, delivering, planning, designing, sharing conscious education. So here's the big domino. Why does conscious education matter? So how conscious education serves us becomes a catalyst for positive change. And there are 4 components that I want to share with you today, which is really all based in your own perception. Because do you know, is your perception even your perception? Or is your perception a consequence of everything and everyone around you? And this is really going into quite a deep level, and we can kind of break that down into these 4 components. So 1, what is your perception of time? And what I mean by that is, if you're working in a traditional system already, you're already largely governed by the time within that system. So how can you look at that with a different perception, not from an enslaved point of view, or need to be here at 8:30, I need to be on duty, blah, blah, blah. But how do you look at that and optimize your time? How do you perceive your time in a different manner? How do you use that time to then influence the second point, which is your presence? Because if you really understood the value of time, if you really had a solid, true, absolute perception of time, then you would have a different presence in each and every moment. And if I go to an extreme of saying, those of us that have experienced a loved one to us passed away, or a tragic accident, it gives us a whole different perception of time and the present moment and how valuable that is. There's that saying, you don't know what you have until it's gone. So how do we use that in a conscious way as conscious educators to optimize, to potentize, to really bring a different essence of ourselves, our authentic selves, as an educator in a traditional system or in a non-traditional system, in a place-based system or in a startup, as a leader, as an educator, as a parent, as a community member, as someone who has responsibility for humanity and for nature, how do I bring a different presence of time through my perception of time, which leads to my perception of myself? And that moves on to the third component here. And the third domino falls, which is, how are you aware, first and foremost, of your cycles? This is something, if we can look at from a holistic systems thinking point of view of interconnectedness, that the cycles of time, we are inherently intertwined with the cycles of the universe. We know that from a seasoned approach. Now, depending on your northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere, or in the equatorial regions, that we have a different feeling of the movement of time throughout the year. But indigenous cultures and ancient cultures knew there were certain elements within a place-based setting which were aligned to the consequence of the cycles of time. And they put these certain placeholders. Now, myself, my mother is from Bali, so we have a Balinese Hindu family. And I come from a Brahmin bloodline, which is the bloodline of priests and scholars and poets and advisors. So when you look at the Balinese calendar, it's a very, very wise calendar, which is based upon the lunar cycle. So in the Balinese calendar, you have 210 days, which equates to a lunar year. And when you look at the quantification of that calendar, the cycles of time, it becomes very interesting how you can align those ancient indigenous wisdoms with your current systems of calendars, seasons, and cycles. So if we take a whole different approach to how we structure our calendar, and first and foremost, we can say, why do we have 4 school terms, 2 semesters? And if you fast forward into that and you look at how economic systems are now built upon those holiday periods, hotels go up, travel expenses go up, the whole capitalistic economic machine goes into overdrive, and we have super mass expansion of expenditure, we have huge demand, and we have all of this upheaval in this capitalistic model, which traditional education systems and the industrial model of education has perpetuated over time. So if we take a whole different approach to that and we say, what is a different cyclical observation, a cyclical view of time according to the place that I am at? Now, the last one here, we can't really see because I've blocked it off, but let's bring that up. It's dialogue, okay? So this is what it's all about. When do you have conversations with educators, fellow educators, either colleagues or on professional development, about the perception of time, the perception of your presence, the perception of cycles, and the perception of dialogue? And what I mean by perception is your understanding of your important responsibility to be an active participant, an active contributor, and an active creator within your education system. You cannot tell me that, I only work in a public school and it's just an industrialized system and I have no freedom and this and that. You do. In some way, shape or form, you do. So you need to shift your perception out of that victimization mindset. You need to look at the landscape, understand the lay of the land, understand the contours, understand the path of least resistance, and you need to shift internally your perception of the external, shift internally your perception of your presence, shift internally your understanding and perception of cycles, shift internally and be an active contributor to spark conversation, to engage in warmth of dialogue in a non-combative and a non-competitive manner. What do we teach? What do we allow spaces for learning and teaching to happen with children? We allow questioning. So as an adult, how do you have a childlike questioning just to enable a space, enable those openings within traditional systems, within the confines of your week and time and all the things you have to do? How do you enable that conscious educator movement mindset to imbue everything that you think, feel, and do. So let's move on to the 3 pillars, what I call the 3 pillars of truth. And these are distilled from many, many insights over many years of working in traditional systems, industrial models of public education, working in the Waldorf system, which can be considered an alternative and a progressive model, even though in Waldorf worlds, they often say that Waldorf education is so far behind, it's in front. And there's something in the simplicity and the beauty of that, and the arts and in the aesthetics of that. And when we look at the conscious branding side of things, then that kind of gives it this new 21st century futuristic adherence to being relevant online and alignment with offline. So number 1, mindset shifts for educators. Question: is it easier to change all of your colleagues, or is it easier to change yourself? Is it easier to change your school, or is it easier to change yourself? Is it easier to change your partner, or is it easier to change yourself? So we need to enable that freedom and understanding that by changing ourselves, which is what we have ultimate control over, by changing ourselves and our mindset on education, our mindset on ourselves being educators, then we also change the external. We change how we operate in traditional systems. We catalyze how we create in progressive conscious systems. So there's huge power in shifting our own perspective. And simply by your presence, you'll be able to shift the perspective of other people's. So we need to overcome those limiting beliefs in education about us and our role and the stigma and the societal pressures and parents and leaders and governments and nations. We need to shift that perspective of what a conscious educator can be. And this is why the terminology is so incredibly important. Not a teacher, I'm an educator. I am a conscious educator. So by our language, we are uplifting. We are moving the discussion out of the traditional, out of the industrial, into a different way of communicating. By language, we'll be able to bring a different essence, able to bring a different insight into our profession. Because ultimately, it's about our profession. It's about uplifting that. So we either can wait for government leaders to say teachers are worth this much, or we actually start being the creators who start moving the needle, start shifting the balance of the communication, the narrative about education. So we need to shift our mindset as educators. And once we shift ourselves, we'll have a good understanding as to how we can frame and the methodologies and the tools and the discussions and the frameworks that we can use to assist those that are willing and those that are curious and those that are fearful. So number 2, conscious education, a conscious education movement is about a place-based design, because naturally what will happen here will be different to what happens there. It's according to the environmental factors, the built factors, but first and foremost, the human beings within the system, the interconnectedness, the alignment, the cohesiveness of these individuals within the system. And largely we know in traditional systems that is heavily influenced by a top-down approach. So how do we have this more of a flatarchy or a holarchy approach, where we're bringing a place-based design to all that we are doing? Now notice we say design first. We don't go into action first. We don't haphazardly start saying this. We need to embrace local context. We need to design learning and the learning environments that are rooted in place. What is the function of roots? Is to nurture the entire system. And then we need to look at fostering community engagement. Community engagement means bringing in industry also, bringing in local wisdom, bringing in indigenous peoples, bringing in a common unity which is built upon all of these factors that you can only find so incredibly unique to every single learning system, every single school, every single place, every single bioregion. So we need to bring this place-based design consciousness and awareness into our practice or into the system that we inherently work within. And the last is conscious branding. And this is something I've really leaned into heavily since I've started my own learning center. And that is when you control the narrative in terms of aesthetics, in terms of language, in terms of all of these different elements which live, love, and breathe within you, which then is a consequence of what happens in the physical and the built environment and the human environment, then you have an authentic approach where people will look at what it is that you're communicating online and offline, in terms of media, in terms of website, in terms of social media, in terms of marketing. And when they come into your physical space, they will feel and they will see an absolute alignment to what it is you communicate in the online space, to what it is you actuate in the physical space. And this is what I mean by conscious branding. It's not just some marketing media logo thing. It really is a deep dive into the conscious logos, or the language we use, the aesthetics we use, and how it is we communicate online and offline. So once we go through those factors, we need to look at transitioning from a traditional approach, or from your fixed approach, or from your perception of limitations into a limitless element. So this is the moment where our theory meets practice, and your role as a conscious educator takes shape. So we need to use this conscious design, the three elements that I just talked about, and the four elements of time, presence, and those other elements where we look at saying, really, what are my cycles? As a human being, I have cycles. And what is my communication like in terms of dialogue? How am I engaging? How am I questioning? How am I facilitating? So we need to speak that forward. We need to have the courage for the truths. And we need our truth to be our only authority. Doesn't matter what system. And then we need to look at the aesthetic component. We need to look at what is authentic to you. Are we using nature in a way, which I see a lot happening, nature in a way to then sell our product, which doesn't have a real true alignment to nature? And we see this in large greenwashing campaigns and carbon offset and SDGs and all of this stuff. So how am I using my aesthetic component, the arts, the beauty of education, the moments that are indescribable? How am I using those aesthetics in an authentic way to shift how I communicate education? So we want to take our impact to the next level. We want to feel that inner value, and we want it to come out. So I'm offering, as part of this whole series, I'm offering some specific sessions for you, one-to-one personal development sessions about conscious education and what it means for you. It's a personalized approach. There are frameworks we can draw upon, but the greatest asset in seeking the key to unlocking these perceptions of your inner value as an educator, as a conscious educator, as a teacher in education, is by having humility and by saying, help, I need help, and here is where it is. Isolate that. And quite often we can't isolate that because there's so many things that are floating around our head, and we don't often have a chance to kind of just really download those into a systematic list. And that's what I like to help people with, because then inherently you start to see it's not an infinite amount of things. So we do that in the intimacy of a one-to-one personal development session. So I want to offer that to you, but also I want to offer the conscious branding guidance. Now, over my years, I've developed branding techniques in terms of bringing the terminology down, and in terms of identifying and naming what that identity of the program or the learning space or the course or the school or the workshop or the facilitation that you're doing. All of these different elements, there's huge power, untapped power in developing a conscious logos, a language to that. And this is part of what I offer as the conscious branding guidance. And then we go into design, and then we go into beautiful aesthetics and social media and web development, and making sure that we have a unique approach which is matched to your authenticity, but not blocked by your creative limitations or your creative self-beliefs. So we kind of merge this upper and lower realm of beautiful aesthetic artistic design and with your authentic approach to education as an educator. So these are exclusive opportunities that I'm going to open up to you, and there are 3 free things that I'd like to kind of cast wide open to you, and they're for you. It's a free discovery call, a free branding template, which is a really interesting tool where you go all the way out there and you write these things down in a time manner, and then you start to distill what your brand, what your name of your identity, as I said, the program, the course, the workshop, the school, the learning center, the initiative, all of these things have huge, powerful meaning where you go from the macro to the micro, and everything in between becomes incredibly useful content for you. And also to open up free community access from a conscious educator group that I have on a platform called School. And so far there's people involved in many different elements of education, and the interconnectedness is something which is really exciting for me. So these are exclusive opportunities on the offer for you. The links are in the bio and in the description, and you can see for yourself and book that for yourself. So here's a Q&A session. So addressing your burning questions. So I'm going to invite you at the end to put the emails in, to contact, to reach out, to be brave enough to ask questions and not to just receive all of this information. So how are you engaging with this? Now, dialogue has the word die in it, so it represents two. There is a duality to this. So I'm putting all of this out there, and I want you to respond with that with your questions. And I've put over on the left there, okay, but, because there's always a but. People always have a but. And I want to listen to what that is, and I want to break that down, and I want to help you break it down into actionable steps where you actually feel, see, and then observe what actually happens when you manifest that into an action. Because we are the future of conscious education, and your role in it is absolutely crucial. You either put your hands up and say, I check out, and then you succumb to the ways of the world and leaders and principals and colleagues, or you actually say, hang on a minute, it's time for me to speak. It's time for me to engage. It's time to me to find that conscious education creator within me. And we all have it in us. We're just waiting for that opportunity. So I'm asking you, I'm invoking that. I'm saying you are the conscious education future, just as I am. So let's take action from here. Let's take focused action from here. Don't be stagnant with this feeling. There's no need to do it alone. We find independence through interdependence. And I'm yet to find a truly interdependent space. And that's why I'm creating the Conscious Educator Network, the community on the school group. It's free access, and I want you to be on there. I want you to ask questions. I want you to feel comfortable. I want you to bring your colleagues, and I want there to be this interdependent dialogue where it's all generative in nature. Because above all, it's about the conscious education movement. It's about ourselves and how we spend our everyday. It's about how we manifest what we can see for the children, the learners, the community, the people, the cultures, how we bring this ancient wisdom to the forefront of indigenous wisdoms and indigenous technologies, and a subservience to the land, and how we are custodians of the land, how we are custodians of our community, and how it is that we bring these transformative insights for educators at a global level. Thank you for joining me. You can find me on peterphillips.xyz, and my email is there, and social medias are there too. I look forward to providing another webinar very soon.